you gonna tidy up that data? So I've been trying to learn R, and I learned there's this thing called the Tidyverse, and it's this library that has these different packages that make things a lot easier, and you can use it instead of like base R. So base R is like the original version of the code and everything. And then TidyR, it's actually, or Tidyverse, it's made by the people who make RStudio, which is like the graphical or the IDE, like the integrated design environment that you can actually work with on your desktop, and it makes things a lot nicer, and you can actually see things as you go along. And so this Tidyverse has this series of packages. It includes like ggplot2, which you might have heard of, which is used a lot for making graphics and plots and stuff, which I've been trying to wrangle my data with. Speaking of wrangling, there are tools like Dplyr and Tidyr, which allow you to wrangle your data. So like to make tables and different forms and add columns, delete columns, do math, all this sorts of crazy stuff. And I am in no way an expert. I just wanted to let you guys know about this thing called the Tidyverse, because you might not run into it. You might at least initially, or you might run into it like accidentally. Like you might see a script and there's all these like what do you call those? The ampersand, not the ampersands, the percent signs, like with the caret. Basically that's like this like pipe thing, which allows you to take things from one line and make it go into the next. Basically there's a bunch of really cool stuff that you can do with the Tidyverse that makes things more simple. However, a lot of the code you might run into is probably written in the base R, so in like the original form where you're using like brackets and dollar signs and all of this notation to indicate things, as opposed to in the Tidyverse where you use things like select, like the word select and the word like filter and group by and all of these different terms. So the Tidyverse, it uses this like tidy language or whatever, but basically it tries to make things in a more like human friendly format, which as someone who's trying to learn R is a big asset. But you still, because some of the other code that you might run into is written in the base R, you want to make sure you know the base R as well as the Tidyverse, if you want to use the Tidyverse. So if you Google something for help, you might see things like, this is how it's done in base R, this is how it's done in the Tidyverse. Sometimes you can tell just by looking at it, oh, this is from the Tidyverse. So the Tidyverse is like a library, so when you like install it, you have like it comes with these different packages within it that I'll get into in a second. And so each of those packages then like is in there, but you can like then load them into your session. So basically in R, you have to tell it what you want to, what packages you want to use, and like and what library you want to use. Once you like install them, they're on your computer, but every time you run a program, you select which ones you want to use, because so that your program isn't just like trying to go through all of these different packages and get really confused. So thankfully RStudio makes all this really easy. On the right hand side there's this little thing and it's like install packages, and you can like even search for them. Really simple. So all of that stuff is made really nice, and then trying to figure out how to actually use the code though is really hard. And I am not an expert at all. I'm not going to try to teach you how to use R, but I will show you some link to some resources that are super duper helpful. So my friend showed me there's like all these like cheat sheets, and so then there's like these online tutorials, and there's tons of videos, and there's all sorts of stuff. So let me show you a couple things about this Tidyverse. So Tidyverse consists of these like 8 core packages, and so you might not use them all, but there are some that are really helpful. And so these 8 packages, basically because they're all designed by these same people, they work together nicely. So they use a lot of the same like syntax and that sort of thing. You can easily work between them. This is nice because in R, sometimes you'll find that there's a lot of packages out there. And so like there's this thing called CRAN, this repository where you can get all of these different packages, and you can install them directly in RStudio as well. But because those packages are all made by different people, some of them might use the same commands, but have different functions, or they'll have, so they would conflict, or they use different syntax. So one of them you might use like a period, and one of them you might use underscore. The nice thing about the Tidyverse is that it's all like formatted so that it'll work together seamlessly. So the main one, well, I mean, I guess not main, but one that you will probably have might have even heard about is ggplot2. So ggplot is used to make graphs. It can make all sorts of really, really nice graphs in all sorts of different forms. And so there's this nice thing too called like this R graph gallery. And it has all sorts of different graphs and examples. So for everything from like a simple like box plot, just which is something that you could do like easily in base R as well. But you can also do really weird complex things. And so here it'll have examples with the code for making these different ones and all of this sort of thing. So this is a really helpful tool, and you can also get like inspiration and all of this you can then learn more about as well. With ggplot, it's like definitely a learning curve. Speaking of a curve, that's a pretty cool curve. But ooh, it's like interactive. Okay, but sorry. Anyway, it's definitely a learning curve. There are these helpful cheat sheets from the RStudio for these different these different packages, including the ggplot2. So it is very weird. You have to really get used to it. And I have not gotten used to it yet. But thankfully there's this cheat sheet. But basically you have to define like the aesthetics and the geometry, and I don't know. There's this, yeah. It's very confusing, but it can give you really, really, really cool looking graphs, and you have a lot of control over it once you figure out what you're doing, which is really, really nice, because if you try to plot something with like Excel or even like Prism, you have very limited control, at least easily, over what the font is, the sizes, those things you could probably do. But like, have you ever tried to make something in Excel and like the columns, you cannot get them to be like the width that you want, to like right on top? Yeah, basically you can do a lot of really, really, really cool stuff with ggplot too. You just need to get used to working with it because it's based on this like grammar graphic stuff. I don't know, really weird stuff. But you can learn all about it on the ggplot2 site. And then there's a bunch of resources that you can learn. They have all sorts of different courses, webinars. There's this like free book that you can read online about data science, like this totally free, just like online book with everything about all of these different things. And so yeah, so it's a bit overwhelming how much resources there are out there actually. Another thing about ggplot being so complicated is that you end up actually making some really crazy looking graphs that are nothing like what you meant to do. And so sometimes you can even like on Twitter or whatever, there'll be people like with these like, I did not mean to make this art plot, but it'll be something like super duper pretty. That's like abstract art. So it's probably a lot more fun when it's somebody else's that you're in, not when you're in the midst of it and you're like, why isn't this working? But anyway, they can be pretty. And so, yeah, a little brighten up once you actually, as long as you then figure out how to actually do it, then your failures can be kind of fun. Okay, so that's ggplot2. This is then another one that's really common. The other couple that you likely will use are like Dplyr and Tidyverse. So these allow you to like manipulate data and like rearrange the data in tables. So with like Dplyr, you can do all these really cool things, like summarize down columns, and you can filter, make groupings, all sorts of really, really awesome stuff, which doing with data tables. And with a lot simpler, like I know that this looks like super duper complex, and it is, and it's a little overwhelming,
but it is a lot easier to do things like select by where you're just using words here. So like they're selecting this data, like this tibble. Oh, it's the other cool thing. They call these like tibble. They have like tibbles rather than like data tables or whatever. And so that's just a fun word. They're slightly different in very like technical sense type of things. But basically the tibble is like your table. But you can easily select things using like words instead of weird symbols and brackets and stuff. So this is a lot nicer than with the base R. You can also, then there's like tidier or tidy, yeah. Basically this allows you to change the shape of data, like data tables or tibbles or whatever, so that you can combine columns and separate them out, make your things squished or more squished or longer, which is this is one of the tricky things about ggplot too, is that it like wants your data to be in this like long format. Where basically instead of being like all squat, it's longer. And so you have to like pivot it. Yeah. But that's just something to be aware of when you are trying to use ggplot. But there's a lot of resources out there to help you. And so yeah, so those are a few of the ones that I run into. There's also like Reader, which allows you to read in CSV files, etc. And so the difference that you might notice as opposed to like in base R, it's like read.csv. Here it's like read_CSV, and it'll make things into a tibble rather than like a data frame. There are some other things I don't even really know what per. It allows you to do like make loops or that sort of thing, I guess. I'm not exactly sure. Is this just showing you here's that weird pipeline thing? So maybe you use things, but you don't even realize it. Okay, so Tibble's the data frame type of thing. So I guess you are using it, even if you don't know you're using it. Stringer, some things with string manipulations, forecast. So I mean, like this is all working together as part of the Tidyverse, and so you don't even know sometimes which one you're using, I guess. But yeah, so those are just basically the core of the Tidyverse. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I just wanted to introduce you to this concept. Oh, there was this other cool one. Oh, where was it? It's like reticulate. There's this thing where you can actually use Python in RStudio. And with this like reticulate thing. So I'm looking into that as well because I'm using some like pipelines and stuff that have both R and Python, and so it would be nice if the Python stuff would just be like integrated in there as well. But yeah, so I don't know if this video was helpful to anybody. I just wanted to let you know that this thing like exists, that there is this thing called the Tidyverse, because I didn't learn about it until after I'd already started kind of learning the base R, which is it's important to learn the base R because as I said, a lot of the times the script that you might see is going to be in the base R. And there are some things that you will still do in the base R, even if you use the Tidyverse. But the Tidyverse makes things a lot nicer for a lot of different functions, and I've had it. I kind of like stumbled across it, and I mean, not that it's not that it's rare. People use it all the time. I'm just like totally new to this stuff, and so I came across this, and then I asked my friend about it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's really helpful." And I found these videos, and yeah. So anyway, this Tidyverse exists. It's another reason why if you Google for help, you might see things in different languages. And this is so a lot of it is going to be this Tidyverse thing, which hopefully will make it easier to learn R for both me and you.
And so for me, really the hardest part has been just trying to get myself to not feel bad about taking time to do this and it being really slow. So it can be, my friends have been helping me, which is really nice. But at the same time, it's like, I want to be able to do this myself, and not rely on other people, asking other people for help when I'm trying to graph something. But so being like a postdoc and stuff, it can be kind of intimidating. You might feel like you should people expect you to know everything. I know that when I was in grad school, I was like, oh, the postdoc must know everything. But really, I'm just like exactly like a grad student, just a little, I have a diploma, but and even less than like a grad student who's doing something that actually involves data science. But basically, just cut yourself some slack. Know that it's gonna take time to pick up new skills, and hopefully I just keep telling myself that these skills are going to be transferable and usable in a lot of different forms. Even though like I've been spending like hours trying to figure out how to how to get this data to do what I want. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to do it a lot faster.